until we meet again. But you haven't subscribed yet, so please do, and also like this video. And if you already did those, you're a legend. Onto the video. Yo, what's up guys, new video, and we're talking about the 4-star special league that is coming pretty soon. So once this video is released, it's probably coming the day after. And if you want to focus on this 4-star special league just to have fun or to just actually get a better rank or anything like that, these are a few tips and some few recommendations that can help you with, like either creating the runes, deciding whether you want to do special league or not. So first of all, you do not have the possibilities of saying, okay, I want to have all of the data saved for 4-star and then also saved for normal or normal RTA or whatever you want to call it. So for that, I recommend to create a swap, save it as a different file name, and then revert that at some point so you can actually go back to that your JSON. You can see what kind of units were runed differently, and then you can set that back. Sure, it's not the easiest way as one click of the button and just resetting the whole template, for example, but at least it is a way that you can re-rune your stuff and then rune it back pretty easily. So if you create a JSON right now and then save it as a different name, that would be my recommendation of way to go. Also, other things that if you're going to work on Special League, the first week is not as interesting as the second week. The first week, everyone is going to start at the same amount of points. So if I'm not mistaken, for Special League, everyone will be set back to 1,000 points. Whereas if we will go for normal RTA, people that are G3, for example, are set back to like 1,400 something. So that means the first week, a lot of the higher tiered player, like the top of the food chain, let's call it that way, is going to fight like the bottom of the food chain, kind of. So if you're getting stomped the first week in Special League, do not feel discouraged. It's just because you're playing against people that are higher ranked, trying to climb to their rank. So in the first few 3, 4, 5 days, if you play Special League and you're normally not ranked like Guardian Plus, just take a chill, just try out some units, expect to have like a bunch of losers here and there. And in the second week, try to start aiming for climbing and that kind of things. So with Special League, there's actually 4 different ways of playing. And it's also kind of for normal RTA as well. You have, of course, the bruisers, a whole bunch of AoE cleavers, AoE single target cleave, and you have AoE CC. So I'm going to go over some of the units that will fit all of those scenarios, which I recommend are good for that, which I recommend you to build in general, whatever playstyle you have. But in general, what is very important in Special League is people are going to take easy wins or trying to take easy wins. What is an easy win? AoE cleave in most cases. So if you build a very strong counter to AoE cleave, you are going to get pretty far in Special League. So what kind of units are important for Special League? I'm going to point out a few specific units which I say are like the high contested units in Special League 4-star, which in most cases are a lot of the 2As. And afterwards I'm going over each element and just saying like, okay, which unit I would recommend to build, which kind of builds I would recommend on it, and also what kind of playstyle I recommend on those. So in my opinion, I think the most contested unit in this Special League will be Asher. Asher can be both Vio, can be Swift. I would still go for both on a speed, HP. You could go crit damage slot 4, but you do a lot of damage by additional damage from HP and speed. And this is just pretty much one of the best damage dealers, bruisers, strippers, healers. And then he has a worse as well. But this unit just does a whole bunch of things. Speed in Special League is pretty important because there's not too many speed leads. There's not too many good boosters out there. But Asher is probably the highest contested unit in Special League. Another very high contested unit I expect is, and has always been, Triana. So Triana is one of those main counter cleave units. Asher, by the way, works in like pretty much all teams, also in AoE CC. It works in Bruiser, it works in single target cleave, it works in AoE cleave, kind of. But yeah, then we have the main counter for, or one of the better bruisers, and also the main counters for AoE CC, but also single target CC, which is Triana. Triana builds are very, as like a big variety. You could go for like damage, because Triana S1 actually does a lot of damage. Do not focus too much on getting a lot of attack, but aiming for a lot of speed, a lot of crit rate, a lot of crit damage. Triana will start to do a lot of damage, and then if you want to make it do damage, artifacts for base on attack, crit damage S1, those kind of good stuff. She can do a lot of damage, and she's very deadly. So I think those two are the most highly contested, semi-free-to-play units you will see. I think the king of 4-star is still Tableau. that's the absolute king of 4-star. The reason is that it is a 24 lead, but it's way better than the other 24 leads, because the other 24 leads are very straightforward, which is, for example, a Shimete only really works in, or mainly works in cleave comps. You have Izaria, is good but doesn't really work against immunity kind of stuff. So therefore Tableau is a very strong unit, and it's, you could build him Swift, you could build him Vio. It works on a whole bunch of things. So I think those 3 picks are the highly contested, like especially towards the end of Special League and towards like the higher tier Special League. But let's actually go over some normal elements, and I think I'm gonna start everyone off with the 2As. So Iselia is a very good one for AoE CC, but also AoE damage. This thing with additional damage artifacts does a lot of damage, and it's probably one of your to-go strippers if you want to use a stripper, because it's just full of damage. Every skill is multi-hit, very strong unit. Tattoo is not really used. You see Ursa used sometimes. It's a good flex pick, like near the end of a draft where someone doesn't have any immunity. Then this thing becomes pretty strong, but you don't see it all too much. Rogue, pretty good pick as well. So I'll wait also for build. So this would probably be a speed, crit rate / attack, and then accuracy, I would say. This thing is probably just built on extra HP, triple HP, speed, HP. Rogue, you see sometimes there's some specific cleaves that really work with Rogue. If you go, for example, some other units that do damage by speed, the teams where you have like the dark chilling and that kind of stuff. There are like a few options where you can build him into a cleave as well, which are pretty funny. So Rogue, overall good unit, just the damage that you could go somewhat semi-bruiser on him as well. Spectra, wouldn't really recommend. Kali is something you see in cleave teams as well, typical Kali build. Probably fast, probably swift, probably a lot of damage. But is it one of the better units out there? I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad, but you know that you're going to die pretty fast on this unit in most cases. This one you could build, but I don't really see the need of that. Also for Rebecca, I think Rebecca's not that great as one of the 2As. You could build it as a cleanser if you would like. It is an option. Same for May, you don't see it all so much. So let's go to the normal elements that you will probably see a lot. Ranuki, as we call it in Doubt, which is actually called Rakuni, is probably an option that you would like to build for some cleanses here and there. It's a pretty solid pick all around. Other picks that you would probably see is Shihua. Shihua actually has a lot of multi-damage as well, with some good CCs on the S2. So I think this is a unit that you will see mainly on like speed, HP, attack, fire, will kind of build with additional damage artifacts. These units you're not going to see too much. Akia is actually a decent unit too, because especially if you go for multiple units with sleeps and that kind of stuff in there. Probably a Vio will build. Or Vio Revenge. Revenge actually works on her as well. She has decent S1 and a lot of mobility on that. Garo is a unit you might see a little bit here and there. It can work for the 33 or for the 30 speed lead, and it's relatively hard to kill, so that could be a unit you would like to build as well. Clara is a unit I'm going to think that a lot of people will build, because Clara, third skill, is very strong. Can be built probably Despair or Swift, and also additional damage artifacts I would say on her. But I think Clara is a very good solid pick for Special League. Of course, Verdiheal is a very strong pick for Special League. You could go triple Revenge, but I don't think triple Revenge is that good. Vio Revenge is probably better, and Swift anything is probably also very good. I think Chloe against a cleave team that doesn't have any strips is very strong, because Chloe base speed is very fast. So a very fast Swift set on that. You sometimes see Chloe's with triple Nem on it. I don't really think that would work too well in here. Why you don't see too much. Antares you see a lot, and the typical Antares build, don't have to talk too much about it. But Antares is definitely a unit you will see. A Draco in cleave teams, typical speed unit, you will see it. This thing, why? I'm not sure. Some people might here and there use it, but the S3 is so inconsistent. I don't think it will be used that much. Platy is something some people sometimes use. Base speed is kind of terrible though, but the S3 has a... yeah, it stuns, and I think it also resets, right? So, and it does Grand Life. It's a nice last pick. This thing might actually be a very legit pick if you go into a very bruiser heavy, lots of healing teams. then she has good potential to kill something. So I think she could be an interesting last pick on a damage build. Lisa is definitely something you're going to see more, probably or mainly for the S3, and you would pair it with things that have nice S1. So like, for example, Verts and things you would like to cleanse, anything like that. I think she will be used here and there via build, but probably not too much as well. Now we have Kamoon. In Bruiser fights, he's actually kinda underrated. I feel like his shield that he provides every turn can be very annoying, so very hard to deal with. So you could see it here and there, I guess. These units you're not gonna see too much. Ludo maybe here or there, but don't really see it. Harmonia is a decent unit. It's somewhat annoying with the unwanted harmony, but I don't think it is placed too much. It is a good counter to cleave teams though, because you can build it just very tanky and then have that rolling for her. Carcano is mainly for guild leads, anything. I wouldn't think it will be used all too much. Same for the units in here. This could be your booster to go as well. It could be used here and there. Kaki. I think Kaki will be used here and there as well. Kaki is still a very strong unit for damage dealing, especially if there's like a Molly on the enemy side. But you're very susceptible to cleaves. Robo, I like the Robo because he counters a bunch of the net 5s. You could use him into an net Terrace, but besides that, there's nothing too much that gets instant additional turns where you want to use him. These I don't expect to use. This you could use and build if someone is pulling like heavy succubus teams on you. So this would be a counter to succubuses, I guess, but don't really think you will be using it too much. So that is pretty much for fire. So the heavy to build units for fire, I would say, are of course Vert. I would say Clara is very good. I would say Shihua is pretty good. This, if you would like to cleave, and Terrace, you probably have Rune up. Arnold, I didn't actually speak about, but has a decent S3 against some units to snipe one-shot something as well. And as a tanky unit, this, and as a bruiser unit, that. So that is probably what I would recommend to build. Going into water, of course, starting off with the 2As one more time. Elucia is probably a unit everyone has and is very strong in Special League because it's just a lot of CC and healing possibilities in there. These are not really used. Ikaru I probably don't really see being used as well. Khan is actually a very interesting unit. If you're working with a team with a lot of dots and you actually let him do S2 and on a lot of dots and he gets another attack bar after defense breaking and then you S3. S3 can easily do up to like 30 to 50k damage. So you will one-shot shit. So this is a very interesting unit. If you're going for a more dot / debuff heavy team, he's definitely a unit you would like to build. Then we have this one no one really knows. Lulu, of course, since there's no Riley, Lulu is probably still one of your better cleansers in the game, so I would recommend to build it. Vigor is also one of those high contested units, arguably maybe as contested as Asher. Very good bruiser kit, very strong overall, very hard to kill, does a lot of damage, has the speed buff, the cleansing, or the crit rate reduction and that kind of stuff, so it's overall a very strong unit, and this is pretty much a must build, I would say. Mina's also one of those very strong units. You could build her swift and probably outspeed things. But if you build her Vio, she Vio procs once on a very good damage set, which doesn't need any crit rate because of the passive. Or I would still aim for some crit rate, because if you're hitting armor breaks and you don't crit on S1, you're not going to do your other skill. So yeah, you kind of want to have some crit rate. I would aim like 40 to 50-ish. But yeah, she's a very strong unit, which is also very recommended to build. Then we see Alan. Probably not really going to see that being used too much. Megan, of course, if you like Megans for your cleaves, Megan is still in there. And then this thing, same, that you don't probably use it. So looking at the net 3s and the net 4s. Konamiya is an option for some cleanses here and there, but it's, in my opinion, not that great. Wouldn't really focus too much resources into that. Then we continue on with the net 4s. Tyrone is a very strong one for AoE CC, also a very good speed lead. But you have to keep in mind, if you're fighting a lot of immunity, his whole kit does pretty much nothing. But it is a speed lead of the 19, which I would say is very viable in general. Izaria, 24 speed lead, but once again, if you're fighting immunities, you're not gonna have a great day. But an overall bruiser unit late pick, I would say Izaria is pretty much one of those must builds. Sion is very good in the case that someone doesn't have any immunity, so I would recommend to build this one. At least keep it runed up with, I would say, a fatal will set and just a lot of damage. Susano is a very strong unit if they go very fire heavy on the enemy side, but we didn't see too many fire units, but Susano is still a very good unit that could solo things. Julie, of course, is one of those cleaver units, typical cleaver builds, and could be very strong too. Leslie is something you see very randomly and is also against a very fire-heavy team, but I'm not sure if it would be that great, to be honest. Rigel against a lot of multi-hitters that probably don't have any sustain and a bunch of stunts. Rigel could be a very interesting one to pick as well, but I wouldn't see him being used all too much. Orion is really a wild card. I wouldn't really recommend to focus too much on Orion because you're gonna have bad days with this harmless prank. It could be very disbeneficial for like whatever it does. And we have Miyang. Miyang is actually pretty strong on the S2. It's a very high damage S2. S3 is pretty nice, but lead to bad is for guild only. But I would say it's not a bad unit, but wouldn't really recommend to focus on too much. Aeger's pretty old school. We used to use a lot of Aegers back in the day, like 2018, 2019. Mainly 2019, I think. But still a very strong, powerful unit. So, and he actually does Berserk right now. So he's more tempted to die faster, but he does a lot of damage. Then Tetra, if you want to reduce some dots. These units, Chilling is, I would say, also one of those must build units. Simply because his S1 also strips and he also heals on those strips right now. So if you're fighting a team with a lot of immunity some way, this is probably something you would like to have in your back pocket to actually build at or like to pick at a later moment. Herny is something that you could build, but I think in the net force there's not as many crazy passives as like that the LD5s have in most cases. So I'm not sure if Herny will have too much implication, but you could use it. Same, for example, for Abigail. I could see her being used as an AoE/CC kind of unit, but not too sure. Probably on an additional damage build, she's pretty nice. And this one is a nice cleaver for single target stuff. Then if we continue on, I think Suiki is a pretty nice unit too, because if you're fighting a very slow, drawn-out fight with Lulus, Mollies, that kind of jazz, Suiki is going to stack a lot of damage and would be nice to have on a fire build, for example. So that is everything for water. So the heavy hitters that I recommend for building for water would be, I would say, a Tyron is nice, Isaria is nice, Susano is nice, Aeger is optional, and besides that, I would say Chilling is pretty nice, Abigail is kind of optional, and Suiki is kind of optional. And then if we scroll down to the 2As, I would say Elucia is a must, Vigor is a must, Lulu is very recommended, and Mina is very recommended. Going on to the water units. Video is already kind of lengthy, but that is okay. Starting off once again with the 2As. We have the 2As of Ramahan, which I don't really like too much. Bernard. I would really recommend to build very strong speed lead as well. Or not a speed lead, but speed booster. And this is one of the few things that you can kind of contest speed on. There's not too many all too good speed boosters that have a lot of base speed, and Bernard is really one of those that I would recommend to build. Another unit I would really recommend you to build is Royd. So Royd can be very devastating to fight because every turn he hits, he does something with his S2 or S3, and it can be provokes, it can be pushbacks, he can armor break. Overall, pretty solid unit, I would say. So the only thing he's screwed by is a lot of immunity. But in Net Force, there's not too much immunity, actually. So then going into the Net 2s, Net 3s, Net 4s. Net 3s, most of them are not too interesting unless you 2A them and already talked about. Net 4s, so we have an option of Delphoid. Delphoid is buffed right now on the S2 that the S2 also gives of Oblivion. It could be used here and there and you have a mediocre heal, but keep in mind that her heal is very mediocre. And she's gonna have quite a bit of longer downtime of using S1s, which are pretty useless. So I wouldn't say Delphoid is bad, but she could be used. Shimete is one of the better speed leads, I would say, but mainly focused on like doing damage. Very low on the base stats for HP and defense, so might be tricky to bring in a bruiser fight, but a very strong unit in general. Orochi we see some people use, especially if you're using a lot of Bernard. Orochi is a very strong, powerful unit. But in most cases, I didn't really build this for Special League. But it's something if you focus for it, it can be pretty nice. Then the other units we see over here are all not too interesting. This can be used for an AoE damage you see kind of stuff with the S3. Ayuno is going to be a very strong, very must-build counter-cleave unit. This is one of your main counter-cleave units that you would have to build. Because he has his revive and he really fucks up like Lucians and Julies and those kind of things. Then Windy wouldn't really build because people are not going to hit it because of the passive. Triana, as mentioned, 100% must build because of, well, counter-cleaves as well. Very good bruiser too. Same for Ayuno. I think Ayuno and Triana are probably your best counter-cleaves from the normal endowments. Wouldn't really recommend to build a Skogel. Wouldn't really recommend to build a Fuki. Carbide is an option if they go very water heavy, but don't really expect that to happen as well. So there's not too many wind units in there, but the ones that I would recommend to build, of course, Lucian is in there as well for cleaves. Those are very, very strong. So we don't have too many units, so I would say Bernard is important, Royd is important, Ayuno is a must, Triana is a must, and Shimate is a semi-must Lucian if you like to cleave. And then besides that, it is not too much, I would say, actually. Orochi could be done. It's not too much for the wind, I would say. Going on to Light. Light we have, of course, Bella is a very strong unit. Can also be used as a swift unit to surprise people and to boost people with this skill. It's actually pretty funny. Shaman is used here and there. Sren is pretty nice for the S2 and also has some healing. More for bruiser unit than her sisters. We have, of course, Asher in there, which I already mentioned, must build. You could arguably say, okay, I want to build a Darien for counter cleave. I'm not sure how good it is, but I think it might be pretty nice to slap in a Darien last pick against cleave kind of units or teams. So then going towards the light units itself. Kabila is an option if you want to outspeed, but besides the outspeed, it doesn't do all too much. Sren is already mentioned, Darien already mentioned. Fran is 100% a must build. Fran is a very strong unit. Just the typical Fran builds. And it's one of the few units that can provide immunity for multiple turns, so it's really recommended. Lauren, of course, is a very good unit for single target kills in that sense. We also have Chami, which used to be HOH, I can mention that as well, because most people will have that. And for bruiser fight, she's very good as well, because her S3 gives her a lot of damage at some point. And if you do a lot of additional damage by attack, she's going to stack a lot of damage at some point. Continuing on, Isha is not that interesting. Mihil is pretty nice for a bunch of things if you have it for bruiser fights. Arya also, I guess, if you go a full light team, then Jin is a very nice option. Full light team being with units, for example, Chris. Chris is one of the strongest single target killers. Very interesting unit if you have this, because it does a lot of damage, and if something is not stunned, you get an additional turn. So this is a very interesting unit if you want to go single target killing teams. Hellfest, I have seen it, some people use it here and there, but wouldn't really recommend it all too much. It is an option, but probably at some point the HP depletes, the attack goes up, and Hellfest just dies near the end. Then we have Gemini, which is very good, of course, for AoE CC and AoE cleave. Then we have Dover. I think Dover is one of the more interesting bombers because his S3 is actually very powerful too. But you can only use it against no immunity teams or as a second turn cleave kind of stuff. Molly, of course, a very powerful, very strong unit. Don't have to talk too much about that. Everyone knows that. Iris can be very good, but the only thing you have to keep in mind with Iris is that Iris is going to trigger everything for passives if she AoE hits. So if there's counters, they could hit on that counter. There's just a whole bunch of things that you could get countered on for Iris AoE hitting. But I say in general, one of the better stripper bruises out there. Then we continue on. I would say Ileana is one of the stronger immunity givers in 4-star. She's pretty much worth nothing in 5-star in my opinion, but in 4-star she becomes very powerful because there's not too many cleansers, there's not too many immunity givers. Keep in mind she doesn't have actual sustain, she has semi-sustain on the shield. But she is a very, if you have her, I would really recommend to build her. And just build her a few speeds below your damage dealers that are high speed. Probably single target damage dealers. So if you have, for example, a Chris moving, and then right after you have Ileana moving, something like that, or you use it. I used to do that with, for example, Fren moving first, Mina moving, and then Ileana moving. So Fren would, Mina would be able to do all of her damage, and she would like annihilate stuff. So very nice unit too. Armana has pretty terrible base stats, but is very good for bruiser fight, and has a very nice kit on the S1, S2 as well. Tableau, as mentioned, I think he is the king of Special League in general. Very, very powerful 4-star unit. Probably, if both players have it and both players know that the other player has it, most contested unit you can have. Otherwise, most contested unit will probably be Asher. Valeria can be nice against some teams, but I don't really would see it used all too much. We have Kinky, of course, which is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, counter to AoE CC, or AoE, not AoE CC, AoE damage cleaves. So a very good unit to have if you have that in your kit. This is something, arguably also something that you can work really weirdly around for against AoE CC. I have one of those, but I don't even think I will be using it. And then, of course, Leia is a very, very strong AoE CC unit as well, but not everyone has those. So the two must builds, I would say, Asher is a must build, Bella is an optional build, Shren is optional build, Fren is a must build, Lauren I would say is a must build. And then if you have the good LDs like Molly, Iris, Ileana, Tableau, those are must builds. And besides that, it is more optional in which kind of way you want. Going on to Dark. And for Dark, we could say, what do we have for the 2As? So for 2As, it is not too much. You could go for Jubel. I'm not sure how good Jubel would do. It would be very good into Iris though, because Iris every turn, like, probably misses a crit and then goes for his passive, which is pretty nice. But I would say Jubel can be decent, but I'm not really sure if he's going to be that great. Other units like Gina is going to be very, very powerful. I haven't built one yet. I'm also probably not going to build one because I don't really want to waste my dimensional energies. But I think Gina is going to be insanely strong for this Special League. Because she provides the dots, she provides the sleeps, she provides a whole bunch of good stuff. So she's a very good AoECC unit, but maybe even into like just bruisers as well. I'm not too sure about bruisers. Very strong daughter, kind of your recap position in Special League is definitely filled by Thrain. Mina over Miho, I don't really expect her to be used that much, but some specific teams that people forgot about her and everything is on high crit rate, Miho might be interesting to still pick. Going on to the net 2s, net 3s, but mainly the net 4s. So Ashubel, very interesting AoECC unit as well with his speed lead. Icarus, very good for the single target killing potential on a lot of HP, probably Swift build or something. Then we have these bombers, wouldn't really recommend to see it too much. I think a lot of people are going to try out Faye, and you always see that, but Faye is so super inconsistent on the S3. I think Faye, rather than the buff that she has that S2 can be going into S3, she should have that if she S3s at least 1 of 4. I would recommend to have the this chance for ignore defense, minus it by 5%, but make sure that the one that you hit it on always does at least 1 ignore defense. So the person that you tab it on will always ignore defense, at least once. And then maybe even minus this to like 20 or 15%, I don't care. But at least always have 1, so the inconsistency is kind of gone in that one. But yeah, because of an inconsistent unit, I'm not too sure if it's that great. We have Frigate, and Frigate is a very powerful, strong booster as well. But he's somewhat on the lower base speed than the other units. But I think Frigate is going to be a very interesting unit as well. The S2 is somewhat inconsistent. The S1 is a good armor break, and the S3 is very strong in general. On a 108 speed build. Beta is also one of those units. If you make a very fast Swift Beta is pretty relatively doable to outspeed other people's speed boosters too. Or even a Vio Battle, and you can provide the anti-crit. So therefore it's pretty nice to use as well, but it's worse than her sister Molly. Other units that are in there, I think Amduet, since everyone got Amduet right now, is a very interesting unit as well. If there is a certain cycling team, and I think it's also one of the main counters on the Tableau probably, and Tableau teams, is Amduet. And Amduet S2 actually does damage by speed, so you can actually go speed, crit damage attack or speed crit rate attack on Amduet and make him do a lot of damage. So Amduet, I think if you are struggling with Tableaus, Amduet is probably your way to go of killing those Tableaus. Could be Despair, could be Despair Will is probably the way I would recommend it. This thing can be used if you want to go with like Rao kind of teams, then this one is not too bad as well. More kind of niche than anything. Martina, Shiner Martina, you could try to run twins in Special League, but in most cases they just ban one or the other and you just screw it that way. And then we have Verisa. Verisa is a very strong, very interesting AoE stripper too, and she puts glancing. And because she puts glancing a lot of units and also attack decrease, she's very interesting to use as well. Can put her on a Despair set. She actually cycles with a decent... Does she increase attack bar? I think she does, right? She does decrease attack bar, she doesn't increase her own attack bar. So there's not really too much cycling for her going on. But she has a very nice skill set to put on Despair. So if you are looking for a nice Despair set to play somewhere, Verisa is definitely something you can think of. So to recap, units I would say recommended to build. Gina's very recommended to build. Thrain is pretty recommended to build. And if we look from this side, I would say, well, these two, if you have them, are very interesting to build. The Ashibel and the Icarus. Frigate, if you have it, is very interesting to build. Badass, okay to build. Phase, okay to build. Amduet, I would recommend to build because a lot of people are going to contest that Tableau, so therefore it's a very good build. Dusky is very optional, and Verisa I would recommend to build. So that is that for all of the units that are I probably think are going to do good in Special League. Of course, if you're using some units that I didn't mention here, it doesn't mean that they're going to be terrible. It's just that they're probably more niche, maybe fitting your playstyle, maybe fitting your runes or anything like that. But I just wanted to give you like an overall recommendation of like, okay, which are the units that I recommend to build? Where would I recommend to use it? How would I recommend to use it? I didn't name like specific builds for all of them, but a lot of them have very straightforward builds, like just how their specific kit is built up in that way. So hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't, like this video and subscribe to the channel. And let me actually know in the comments if you're planning to fully rerune for Special League. I'm actually curious to hear if a lot of people make the time/effort to say like, okay, I want to play this Special League. I'm going to fully rerune for it. And for come to us, don't be lazy, implement the thing that we can switch back and forth between Special League builds and normal builds, because a lot of more people would play Special League if you can actually simply switch back and forth. So that was all for my video. Guys, thanks for watching and see you later.